Okay, so I prepared for about 45, 50 minutes. I hope that's let's see how that works out. And it's live computation running in the background, so there are lots of things that don't go wrong at any time. Yeah, I think we have already, most of you know me already. I'm Agostino. I'm studying with Luca and there. I'm doing a PhD at the chair of digital architectonics at ETH, and there is my second supervisor. And today I'm going to talk to you about the quest.
Which is both your topic and your practice.
Topic and practice, so it's like very dear to my research, very close to my research. That's right. Okay, let's see how first I need to share the screen. But I think that today is less about a very specific quest in particular, or maybe also my quest in particular, but it's more about what you think of the quest as a method towards natural, technical, digital, and vectorial worlds that we might be in today. Gilbert Simondon writes, "Two techniques return to the world to ally itself with it. A new reticulation establishes itself, chosen by techniques, privileging certain places of the world in a synergetic alliance of technical schemas and natural powers. The mediation between man and the world becomes itself a world, the structure of the world." With this, Simondon invited us to think how the technical objects reticulate our world. And then Yukuri invites us to think similarly about how to think. This is something. And then similarly, Yukuri invites us to think of digital objects along similar lines. He writes, by digital objects, I mean objects that take shape on a screen or hide in the back end of a computer program composed of data and metadata and regulated by structures or schemas. And he especially has relational databases in mind. But I want to argue that today the digital world is more than just digital objects that we can see on the screen, because it is newly reticulated through neural nets that work with a special kind of object. It's the vectorial object. Large language corpora became the substrate for today's artificial intelligence, operating in hyperdimensional spaces that lie well beyond what we can visualize. And with digital objects, we at least had some comfort that we could query them in a database. And you would use a structured query language, SQL. But the reticulation of the vectorial world, however, does not only lie in darkness, but it also cannot be conventionally queried, I think, because there's not even a structured query language with which we could articulate such a question. So how could we make sense of this vectorial reticulation of the world? And there's this nice quote by Weile saying, "I have no way of satisfying myself about questions concerning the world, such as what this piece of paper is. Therefore, I must invent a kind of analysis unknown to logicians, an analysis that is the source of an orderly progression. But isn't that absurd? What could such a progression be based on? It must be based on the world." And so, what we thus observe in the world is based on our method of questing it. And today I want to present an attempt of what such an orderly progression looks like. Because that which cannot be queried might allow for being tested. Where the structured query language knows its way, the quest does not. Here the path needs to be actively found, it needs to be invented. And so, if you want to learn about the new vectorial reticulation of the world, we might need to go on a quest. How to think of such a quest? What are the architectonics of such a quest? How might we use code on this quest? And when does such a quest become epic? Gilbert Simondon introduces us to many quests. So there's, of course, his own quest of understanding ontogenesis, there's Bacon's quest for universality, there's Balthasar Blai's quest of the absolute. Then he writes of evolution's quest of making the individual coincide with the milieu, and humanity's quest for freedom. Then there's the artist's quest toward excellence and the architect's quest to invent good form. There is the metaphysical quest towards a unified theory, and there is an aesthetic quest towards reality as a whole. Of course, we also know of the epic quests in antiquity, Homer's Odyssey, Virgil's Aeneid, or in the Middle Ages, Dante's Divine Comedy, or the romances. Today, we also know quests from epic science fiction movies or from video games, that the player follows missions or quests or from fantasy novels, such as the never-ending story. But the query and both the query and the quest harbor the Latin term querere, to seek, to search. But etymology can only go so far. Heidegger writes, the truth then, here and elsewhere, is not that our thinking feeds on etymology, but rather that etymology has the standing mandate first to give thought to the essential content involved in what dictionary words as words denote by implication. So let's approach this obliquely. About a year ago, I bought this mocha pot. And the mocha, that it makes it pretty bad. It's like super metallic and acidic and like, yeah, anyway, it's not great. And I stopped using it. But on the packaging, there was a quote by its designer, Aldo Rossi, and it goes, Nella vita come in architettura, se cerchiamo una cosa, non cerchiamo solo quella. And it translates to something like, in life, as much as in architecture, if we search for a thing, we do not search only for that thing. Obviously, I like that quote a lot, but this is because if you follow Aldo Rossi, who we will meet later today, we can start thinking of the quest as something that cannot but help to exceed the thing in question. A quest can be exhausting, but it's not exhaustive. It gives you more than you can handle or ask for. Now, I'm a researcher, and as it on that title, like it already says it a bit, I'm neither committed into or interested in territory, which would be conquest, or in absolute truth, which would be in inquest, but I'm on a quest too. I'm on a quest of making sense of the vectorial world, and we will see how this does not spare us of questing the quest itself. Hamacher writes, since there are questions only in language, be it the language of gestures, conduct, or social organization, the question concerning the question is in each of its moments a question concerning language. And further, the question concerning the question is the philological question par excellence. Philology is first of all nothing other than the question concerning language and the relationship to language, the question that operates within this very question concerning the question. And on top of that, if our quest is interested in today's vectorial world, then there's no way getting around language. The most transformative neural nets today are transformers working with large language. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Natural language processing, or NLP, is the field that allowed large language models to come about. Processing natural language allowed these models to become intelligent in the sense of an intelligent as reading in between lines of text. And here is an interview with Ilya Sutskever, who is CTO at OpenAI, the company that released GPT-4 just recently. And he is speaking about how AI learns to see through text. And I found that very, very intriguing, this interview.
There's something
Doubling up. Because maybe I should be sharing, because I share a screen sound, and so like maybe it should come through the speakers of the oh. No, it's not. Right, then I'll like just take it.
Oh, I think that's me.
Yeah, I think if you go to the meeting hall and then silence all the computers, then
the all is on. All is on. I share sound and I'm
not connected to Zoom, I think. No.
There's nobody here.
my microphone is off.
One very off for the moment of the video.
No, it's on. But Lucien Garel cautions us from taking language lightly. Many years before natural language processing became a thing, she writes, the natural language, the maternal saying, finds itself bowed to the technical imperatives of the information sciences. Perhaps that which it has always been might appear at last. Man's formalization of the primary nature from which he proceeds and that he wishes to master. So what have we forgotten then? Something else, even if it is an abysmal nothing. Language only allows for the positive of what can be said, without attending to the nothing which cannot. The place only of language is suffocating, there is no air. Air, the silent space of speech. Then the voice, how she writes, of things can be heard by he who is born in the air that surrounds them. So we cannot leave this air unthought. And if we take all of these things seriously, then our brief just became more complicated. Our quest is vectorial as much as lingual. It's mathematical as much as theological. Our quest must not only quest language, but question the very quest of language, to not fall into a mode where language becomes a totalizing reality, or even worse, a mode of technocratically dwelling in the world. The key to the vectorial world we are today might lie in language, but we cannot find it as long as we ecstatically dwell in it. And so to quest means standing in the middle rather than outside. It means leaving the dwelling on its own. But most crucially, we need air supply to not suffocate in it before it starts. Can we think of a place full of air where language can take place, but also silence, where things can take place, but nothing's do, where things blossom rather than being placed at a safe distance? Bruce Irigaray knows such a place. It is the open expanse. The open expanse, the forgotten reserve store, permitting the unfolding of the world, of worlds and being, never touching upon any unsaid. A place of utmost spaciousness, cloud-like and abysmal. A world in between light and dark, highs and lows, this world of threshold where the whole entwines. Who wouldn't want to go there? Irigaray tells us of three people attempting to set off into this mysterious opening, but only one of them succeeds. First is the wandering poet. The wandering poet speaks about the open expanse whilst wandering through the countryside, but he's not there. He remains ecstatically trapped in his language. As he goes along, she writes, he speaks about this endless waymaking, about this mysterious region with other men, moving freely amid their words, pointing things out to each other and showing each other things, but keeping these things within the reach of what may still be said of them. For the wandering poet in the countryside, there is nothing there but a forest that is already surveyed and assessed. Perhaps, she writes, we must take away from him the solid ground, to rid him of the illusion of a path that holds up under his step. And so next she mentions the seafaring poet, who sees the need to depart anew for the most remote of remote beginnings, for a return in which things that are the same will have switched signs, where everything will be differently perceived. Crossing the sea, he does not speak about the opening while walking on solid ground. He transverses it, but fixated on the lands, the role of the opening remains in and perverted. Irigaray finishes the book by introducing us to the last figure, the venturing poet, starting with the abandonment of all language and meaning that are already produced in the venture. Only the venture, and no one knows where it leads. And further, one who does not venture into the abyss can only recount and retrace paths that are already cleared. Alone, ever alone, the poet runs the risk of moving out beyond the world and from there of inverting the open until the ground of the groundless is reached, saying yes to that which calls him beyond the horizon. He can trust in nor heaven, nor earth, nor mouth speaks his pathway. He thus must leave the world, remaining all the while mortal, holding nothing back, giving themselves up to the vigilance open. So here we have the mode of questing the opening, moving fearlessly somewhere between cloud and others. Like the venturing poet, we try to go there too. However, since the book stops here, we must take cues from other venturing poets. And there is one epic poem in particular that seems close to Irigaray's venture in the open expanse. It concerns two venturing poet who embarked on a venture 700 years ago. He visited an abyss and the clouds, staying all the while mortal and versing his quest into versicles. This is Dante, the poet pilgrim, and his divine comedy. And if we trust our assumption that AI and large language models in particular reticulate the world anew, then this must have an implication on how to adventure it. A reticulation between things mathematically encoded and modeled in language cannot be quested without making use of mathematics and language, models and code, an architectonic approach. Uruguay is critical of an architecture operating solely within language and logos. So a different kind of architectonics is needed to venture into the vectorial world. And architectonics exceeds language because it works with codes, which exceeds logos because it works with mathematics. And architectonics that supplies us with models to give us some stability while venturing into the abyssal expanse, where we can then might see objects moving. So the quest needs to work as a model, and if Dante's epic quest imagined and inspired mnemonic models in the Renaissance, so it can help us to think of the architectonics of the quest too. So let's see how this works. So this is an attempt by ChatGPT to model the Divine Comedy. It's a bit wrong, but it works quite well at a high level. So we have a spiraling descent to hell that then inverts into a hill of purgatory, like this, to reach heaven, and then this is heaven. So this is GPT's interpretation of the spirals is wrong. It's like 4 circles, not 9, but whatever. But like it's kind of gives us kind of like it's quite a nice little illustration. So let's look at this, and then let's look at these things that like make up this epic quest. So there is this mathematically precise topography, which are the places on which the quest unfolds. And then it contains, in well-ordered, the things to learn, which are conveyed in Dante's case by souls. And then we have the hero, Dante the poet pilgrim. And because the quest is quite a scary endeavor, there are 40 guides that help the hero along this journey, because Dante's journey is only possible because Virgil and Beatrice who take care of him as time unfolds and the quest unfolds. But there are also big differences between what Dante is doing and what we are doing. Dante looks at the afterworld, while we are trying to quest the vectorial world surrounding us as we speak. Dante is mainly concerned with human souls, while we are looking at the digital and vectorial objects which surround us. So let's think about how these aspects might work for our quest. The hero is intrinsically linked to the quest. Here, especially Campbell's hero journey comes to mind. We are told that heroic stories shall be linear like a spear, hit a point, and require a hero, writes Ursula Le Guin. But the hero, as a protagonist, first and first fighter, has a problem. According to Uruguay, he is shut up inside himself to a degree that attaining anything from outside himself is a difficult task. Virginia Woolf even goes so far to equate heroism to botulism, which is a kind of paralysis that you get from eating rotten sausages. So how to think of a hero differently? Next to it, she writes in her notebook, hero equates bottle. Can this be a lead? Le Guin picks this up, writing, I now propose the bottle as hero. Not just the bottle of gin or wine, but the bottle in its older sense, of a container in general, a thing that holds something else. Dante epically conserves his quest by versing his encounters into versicles, stanzas, and canzones. He writes that what contains the entire art of the canzone should be called stanza, that is, the capacious dwelling or receptacle of the entire craft. For just as the canzone is the container of the entire thought, so the stanza enfolds its entire technique. So we can think of a hero as being no one in particular, but as someone or something that collects things into a bundle and keeps them safe. Next, we talk about things and corpuscles. What are the things that the poet encounter, and recount? The Victorian world is less concerned, like Dante's world, necessarily of souls, but of bodies, corpora of digital objects. If we are to gain some access to the Victorian world of today, then this is through its corpuscles. And this is because each of these floating about in the World Wide Web taught the intelligences of today to write, to Skype, to imagine the world. And digital objects share many different modes of existence. The web is multimodal. There are things to read, like books and sentences, things to listen to, like sounds. The sound is always a bit messy. I'm going to play with this. And then there are things to look at, like this bottle. There are things to query, like database entries. As a researcher with access to a MacBook and a gaming PC, I must be quite resourceful. If I want to work with these corpuscles, I can only accommodate a small fraction of them in a dedicated corpus. The corpuscles it contains must be multimodal, must be curious about our research, and the research must be curious about them. but the web is vast, so what to choose? So primarily, the scholar works with books, and so we source the books from resources. The only undisputed non-book corpus that is forming the canon on which today's machine learning models are based is Project Gutenberg. Then we want to work with archived, freely available books on the internet hosted by the Open Library. And then we want to work with books that are from today. These books are open access. And then from all these 20 million book titles, I then made a collection of 10,000 books that resonated with my research. But a book is quite a lot as a unit. Therefore, we want to also work at the scale of sentences, for which we break up the books into 60 million sentences. What is a sentence? Asked Francois Julien. Let us be clear. A sentence has nothing to do with form in the sense of putting a thought into form, because the sentence is its very deployment. In other words, its condition of existence. It builds, but in a risky fashion, with perilous building acts, by going to the limit with audacity, just for the sake of it. It is adventuresome. So they are great ingredients for an adventurous task. Then we work with 10,000 things. These are things that are considered precious and not. They're lying in between or lying on a curb. Each scanned with a phone or scanner and then turned into digital objects. And they're sourced from Sketchfab, which is one of the biggest warehouses for Creative Commons scans. Then we also work with 10,000 sounds from around the world, which are recorded by over 1,000 volunteers, and about 1,300 material entries of the material archive of ETH. But to make all these different types of corpuscles participate in the vectorial world of neural nets, they need to be encoded, vectorized into a domain that can accommodate all their particular hylomorphisms. And the high-dimensional space of language, indexing sentences and words, could be such a generous place. And often the intelligence of the uploading users already made a start. So they gave things titles and descriptions. But constellations of artificial intelligence can do this too. With varying degrees of success, AI translates between domains, between text and language, language and language, language to text, text to image, image to text. No technology by itself is enough to pursue this goal. Rather, we need to orchestrate a whole constellation or ensemble of technologies into roles that help us. So we have a lector who reads all strings associated with the corpuscles, cleans them and gives them to the translator if they're not in English. We have an inspector that thinks and looks at them, looking at them from each side to probabilistically determine what they might be, giving them kind of certain titles or what color something might have. The auditor listens to sound and then probabilistically assigns them names. So with this technical ensemble set up, the lector reviews all the texts, the auditor gets to work on the sounds, the inspector on scans and materials. They are joined by the encyclopedist. The encyclopedist takes names, concepts, or words from the auditor or the prospector and expands them with context. These are definitions and descriptions that then turn into circumscriptions. And then the translator works away at the materials and chips in with sounds and scans when needed. Soon, every corpuscle is made of the same stuff, called things and language speaks. Everything thinks. If not necessarily word, as Heidegger claims, then at least words. But are we not perilously close to falling for the precise logocentricism that Louis Woodaway warns of? That architecture that imperceptibly reorganizes the perceived, the received, and the appearance of everything that happens, of everything it comes up against, that assigns it a position, a status, a name, that establishes it within a system of relations that has the force of law over the existent and its growth, everything being snared and sandmaze, vectorized and circumscribed according to man's project. So there's little hope that our quest could proceed if we could stop there, suffocated by language, all too powerful. Unless, writes Irigaray, language is opened back up at great depth. Unless everything that language says is gone back through. Unless a path is retraced all the way to the heart of this empty theory that which language has never known how to say is commemorated, freely without care. Thinking numbers. We have millions of sentences. Descriptions and circumscriptions, titles and circumtitles, names and definitions. And we cannot trust these words. We cannot count on them. Words are born, writes Irigaray, out of the line of the ground that rests on the abyss of nothing. Werner Hamacher adds, in the beginning wasn't the word, and the beginning saw that the beginning and the word could come to pass. There had to be a beginningless and wordless counter movement. underway, an end, an un, and d, one that distance the world from its archive, from its ground itself, from its domination, from its violence, and from its use. We need an anarchic place for words not to become tyrannic. We need air to suspend them from their groundedness. In its carelessness, code frees language. We unsentence the sentences by taking away their words. They become tokens. But how to unword a word? Working and speaking are not possible for the word that is self-contained and unconnected unity. Rather, Hamacher writes, they are possible only when it speaks for something else and works for it, for another, when this other belongs to a domain or language on it. So we can make a dictionary of common tokens shared among all things. We can think of a space where every word is a dimension, and against this dictionary, every sentence is a point. And when each word does not only more speak for itself, but for a whole dimension, we forget the meaning of each word. The word as a word is waning. Now two more roles come in. An accountant counts and calculates frequency values. The statistician reduces the dimensionality in latent semantic analysis to 64 dimensions. Now, we forget the semantics of the sentences that form. We forget judgments made with them. All the sentences are now suspended, all words true, in mid-air. They are text corpuscles freed from their context, but they gain so much more of it. They are freed of their original narratives, but allow other stories to be told with them. All our corpuscles are now of the same kind. They are points in hyperdimensional space. They are hyperobjects. They are connected with everything expressed in the tokenized language of our corpus. We can now count on them. Language becomes spacious. It is not anymore a claustrophobic dwelling to dwell in, but unfolding between suspended corpuscles into the open expanse. How to enter it? Both mathematical and philological, each quest offers an opening towards the open expanse. But we cannot recreate the open expanse in our computer. We can also not truthfully cartograph it, because nothing can be commensurate with an open expanse. But we have collected millions of corpuscles, which are in the world as sentences or as sounds, as material objects or as material samples, and in our computer as vectorial objects. As things, thinking words and numbers, they can help us look at the world anew. They are things, and are things in relation to each other only when resettled in good order within the open expanse by its array. And the remove of a distance that enveloping them in the sepulture of air allows them now to last. How can we think of the order between these things in the air in their suspended state? And can the relations between our things, when resettled in good order, form a crystalline mapping of possible regions of the open expanse? Where Dante the poet fashioned a precise model for all the souls he would encounter on his quest, we let our corpuscles turn vectors self-organized into a map of the vectorial world. Working in code, this must not remain an abstract idea. It can become real. It can become a model, and so it can become real. But we need a mechanics that provides this ordering, which has to share some of the cosmical mechanics in common with those ordering the world hosting the things that we settle. The cosmo-technical algorithm drawing a map for our quest. We find such mechanics in the algorithm of a self-organizing map, or model, which we train like here on vectors. Such maps are commonly used to visualize clusters, models to classify things. They can also serve as a search engine to preview. And here on the quest. As a map, it helps us to quest the vectorial world according along the invisible reticulations afforded by machine learning models. As a model, it models and realizes relations between things. We now will look at the training of all our corpuscles. This is a screen. This is a screen, this is a screen, this is a screen. But more than a screen on which to see things, this is a screening screen. In the sense of a sifter for which to sift stuff, where things are shaken into their right place. It becomes an orderly arrangement of the cosmos. However, we cannot see much, as this vectorial reticulation is knitted with nodes that assimilate hyperdimensional vectorial objects that lie way outside of what we can see. So every attempt to see what is going on requires a reduction of dimensionality. So PCA, for example, can color the map into a stochastic spectacle that we can appreciate. How is such a screen fashioned? We initialize the screen into a status of chaos and of noise. Then, put into motion, the algorithm shows. Now, put into motion. Shows how the whole net, as a subset of vectorized corpuscles, causes the whole screen to plastically adapt, not unlike the cosmical mechanics described by Agostino. separating farthest away from one another the dissimilar and pushing most closer together the similar. During multiple rounds of competitive learning, the weights of the nodes plastically change, and either they are driven out to their own kindred by means of this impact and dissolution, or else they are defeated and instead of many forms, assume one form similar to the vectorial kind. Here you can see it again. Adapting its nodes in ever-decreasing radial, it reaches and creates neighborhoods of topological similarity and loses them again when it overfits. We can now look for a metastable position that retains its relations. So it is around here. You can see it here, it's kind of like nice and smooth. And then as we go further up, it starts to become noisy again, and the topological connection between cells is lost. Now we have a screen with which we can screen corpuscles probabilistically based on their own features. We can now screen millions of corpuscles, sifting them towards the right place, just as the particles that are shaken and winnowed by the sieves and other instruments used for cleansing corn fall in one place if they are solid and heavy, but fly off and settle elsewhere if they are spongy and light. But we do not have to make corpuscles fall to the ground. Each node becomes a cell capacious of holding things moving each other. But we work with a very specific kind of vectorial object. It's a hyperobject indexing language that brings its own philological characteristics. Here you can see the screen and you can see the minima and maxima of corpuscles and how it approximates in the milieu within them. And so, because we are working with this like very specific kind of model, we can see that cells that are next to each other contain many tokens in common. And if we see, if we kind of like zoom through it or scroll through it, we see that cells next to each other have many of these code words that are links between each of these cells that like act like a kind of library. And so where the PCA shows us regions, means allows us to show a veritable topography. Robert Venturi might say that it's PCA in plan and mean in elevation. But this is not a stable ground. There are arithmetic means, there are geometric means, there are harmonic means, and all of them offer their own topographies. And each of them are somewhere nested between minima and maxima. So we have a multiplicity of multiple possible values and hills, peaks and troughs of statistical distributions within topological reticulation. Simondon writes, in such a network of key points of high places, there is a primitive lack of distinction between human reality and the reality of the objective reality. These key points are real and objective, but they are that by which the human being is neatly bound to the world, both in order to be influenced by it and in order to act upon it. They are points of contact and of mutual, mixed reality, places of exchange and of communication because they are formed from a knot between the two realities. So how do we connect to these points? Looking at a map alone like this is not enough for such a communication to arise. We need to venture it, quest it. Dante the Pilgrim never sees the model of hell or purgatory or heaven. The poet walks it progressively. Simondon writes, the ascent, the exploration, and more generally any pioneering gesture consists in connecting with the key points that nature presents. To climb a slope in order to go toward the summit is to make one's way towards the privileged place that commands the entire mountain change, not in order to dominate or to possess it, but in order to exchange a relationship of friendship with it. We have no choice, we need to step in. But an infinite amount of quests are possible in this topological map. Which topology to visit, and how to trace a path through this topology. Quests are scary, and often become scarier along the way. In the beginning of the Divine Comedy, Dante finds himself in the middle of a dark wood. In the wood, writes Heidegger, there are paths, mostly overgrown, that come to an abrupt stop where the wood is untrodden. They are called Holzwege. Each goes a separate way, to which the same forest. It often appears as if one is identical to another, but it only appears so. Woodcutters and forest keepers know these paths. They know what it means to be on a Holzweg. When Dante finds himself in a gloomy wood astray, it's just a couple of lines until he's assured to find someone who leads all wanderers safe along the way. I'm not rhyming this. This is actually how it's in one English translation. Again, a couple of verses later, he meets Virgil and Beatrix, who will guide him through the topography of hell, purgatory, and heaven. And then they know these sections of the topography really well and will take good care of him. But what could a guide be within this model? Spirit, or living man, whatever thou be. This is how Dante reads Virgil. Authors, in fact, make great specters. Their whole oeuvre can be a guide, or some of their selected works. A guide shows us a way in sequence, unfolding in one dimension. We can model such a guide similarly like our topography, but as a one-dimensional self-organized map. As we spoke of Aldi earlier, we are now importing and cleaning 2 books by hand to train us as a guide for the next leg of our quest. Of course, also 2 authors can become guide in spectral synthesis, a kind of spectral corpora. Or thanks to the title circumscriptions, circumtitles, and circumscriptions, also a thing that cannot even hold a pen can become a guide. For example, a collection of materials, a collection of sounds, or a collection of stands. And so trained on any corpus of corpuscles, including these 2 books by Agostino that I downloaded from Cineteca, and I have them here in Zotero. Here, these 2 books, The Architecture of the City and the Scientific Autobiography. These were the ones that you just saw training in the background. Oh, actually, you cannot see it because I'm not sharing that part of my screen. Anyway. You can see here that we have, oh no, it's gone. Anyway, for a very short moment, you could see aldo 16, whose aldo is the quality of 16 cells, which is trained to the very max. So not topologically smooth, but super distinct and crystalline. And so aldo shows this topography in profile. And then we can map these to our topography as long as it is vectorized accordingly. So every spectrum, every character navigates differently. And these are the places that aldo would visit on our map. So we now have covered some of the ingredients of an architectonic quest. And it's now time to go. Irregularize venturing we call it scope for vigilant, boldly progressing down paths where others see but darkness and never doubt. The venture, the quest presses on. It is motion, procession, going forth. But how can we proceed from one place to another in the open expanse using our topographic map? In a notebook. Coding notebooks. Through decoding, every point in hyperdimensional space can become a benefit crystal, which we can display on a computational notebook. As we move across places on our map, cells can fill up with potential encounters, with vectorial objects that are decoded into a sentence, a scan, a sound, a sample of a material. But it's far more than a receptive surface, as we can write it coordinated, so it's a computational node. It is the surface in which the quest can unfold as much as on which we can unfold the quest. As a travel notebook, it becomes the container for all the encounters and where they are recorded. And as a mathematical notebook, it contains that which is learned on the way as we walk along. So, for the most part, Dante the Pilgrim walks. Even if guided by Virgil, he must walk the walk himself. We tread in the open expanse as we read in a notebook that compiles itself. Illich emphasizes the act of reading, legere, as a physical activity, picking, bundling, harvesting, or collecting. This was especially true in the 12th century. When Hugh reads, he harvests. He picks berries from the lines, as he picks the fruit from the leaves of parchment, the voces padinarum drop from his mouth, as a subdued murmur. Soon after, there was a turn from this bodily, monastic way of reading to scholastic reading. They no longer approached the book as a vineyard, a garden, or the landscape for an adventuresome pilgrimage, he writes, not quest, that's me projecting. The book connoted for them much more the treasury, the mine, the storage room, the scrutable text. And so I think that while the scholastic way of reading presents us more with something like a database to query, the monastic way of reading seems to have worked more along the lines of quest. Now, if we walk alone, we can proceed along the lines of the weights of the song, which have been settled in the milieu somewhere between minima and maxima. So this is like how we can walk from one cell to another. And you can see these things are kind of connected and we walk, and it's kind of it's a bit boring, it's a bit linear. So this is how like walking would look like. You can hop from one topos to another using the code words as preliminary stepping stones. But the raw corpus would amount to more than 10 years of full-time reading. So I kind of made a little calculation. If I would work 40 hours each week from 9 to 5, then this would be about 10, 12 years of reading this corpus. So there's no way that this is going to happen. And so a guide can help us paying attention to things and putting them into relation with how they speak about the world. And so with some combinatorial optimization, following the traveling salesman algorithm and Bressenheim's line algorithm, we can see the path that Algo would like us to visit to his high places. So these are the high places that Algo wants to see, or like has something to say about. And this is kind of like the path in between this topography that we could take to visit these places. And now, as this is the elevation profile of this course. And now, as we speak, thousands of automated queries run automatically in our notebook. Right now, the computer compiles Aldo's suggested path into the notebook, which fills up a bit like the book in a never-ending story. And so now, we do not read a single book. We can read horizontally the hundreds in our notebook. The quest in the vectorial world abstracts away the query in the digital world. With this abstraction, we again can think of all the books, can think of all the sounds, all the materials, all the scans lying in front of us. A bit like a vineyard, a garden, a landscape for an adventuresome quest. But even when they do not have anything to say, the guides are there. So in these moments where they don't have anything to say. Because they exert a kind of gravitational force, in the way that I called it. They exert a kind of gravitational force on the corpuscles of each of the cells, even if there's nothing to say about them for them. And so they pull corpuscles close to them, quite near for us to tread on. And so through code, things can actively near us. They come to the surface from abysmal depth to greet us. And in this sense, you never step into the same cell twice. Things blossom. Like flowers, they present themselves on the surface of our notebook. Now, I think the notebook has compiled. Oh, this doesn't look good. Let's see. It should be compiling itself. It's a good sign. And now we can look at them. Now you cannot see this, but I'm going to share my other screen. You can see it. So these are all the things that Algo, like in real time, as you saw, gave to us. The both things are things that Algo says. And Algo stands for Algos, of course, but it's not Algos, it's like a spectrum. And then these are things that are kind of relevant with their circumscription to the sentences that he picked. All the not picked things are things that we walk from one cell to another in between. And so there are many things, and they all talk about Algo. It's kind of, I saw another one that I compiled earlier, and it's quite interesting because it starts quite intense. But I saw one of the other models that I compiled earlier, and you feel that it's very interested in cities, in houses, in how people live, and this kind of like goes through it. Even if it's in between high places, then it might talk about archaeology or like some things that were found in some Etruscan villa or like something like this. But it's always kind of connected with some of the thoughts that are here. And then, of course, because this is an imagined notebook, these things, they don't come alone. Like all of these cells come in alternatives, in probabilistic moments that like we can choose upon as we walk on. A bit like when we go through a forest, nobody tells us where to put our feet. We need to put them ourselves. So we can listen to sounds here. We can look at scans. We can look at these materials. And I think this doesn't work here, but I can show it in this one. This was the one that I did this morning. So this is the book as a PDF. And then it was kind of nice that like if you click on things, then things should open up. So we can look at where things are coming from, we can download them from there. if you're interested in a piece of writing, then you can click on it and it should open it in Zurich on the page. If you're interested in the sound that comes up, you can listen to it on the web. I mean, this of course speaks of cities. There's coal, there's Hong normal. So you get an idea. Now, walking is just one possible movement among many. Coding into our notebook, we can also code a whole set of suite more helpers that can help us in our quest, and that can change how we proceed in the open expanse and change the things that we encounter. So with Beatrix, Dante flies through heaven. Here also there's a moment where he flies with an eagle through purgatory. And we can do the same with strap-on wings. They allow us to fly over the topography. If you put them on, we can find out of the topological relationships in which the topographic map is settled. If we fly with a guide, we follow their spectrum very closely, proceeding directly to their high places without us having to tread read along the topography. Of course, this impacts the venture, as we are pretty safe out there, and we learn more about the spectrum of our guide than about the region of the open expanse. So here we can see what such a flight path might look like. It's a bit erratic. Then there are llamas. The song is topologically reticulated, but because it's moved in topology does not mean that it's moved semantically. So we might be standing on the tip of a nose of an insect in one cell and then in the dip of a glacier in another. So what to do in places where the guide has nothing to say and proceeding becomes super difficult? Dante pays Charon to move through certain places that are too hard to traverse. And we do have a rock guide, a semantic pack animal that is well versed in bumpy terrain. And this is Llama. It's a large language model that is released by Meta. And it's quite similar to ChatGPT, with the difference that it can run on local computers. And as a transformer model, it's trained to find ways of probabilistically continuing sentences in the line of least semantic resistance. It meanders along, meditates a little in his scatterbrained and distracted fashion. He zigzags in order to avoid the larger stones, or to ease the climb, or to gain a little shade. He takes the line of least resistance. So the llama bears the semantic burden so that we don't have to. It is perfectly adapted to find ways throughout the steep slopes of our topography. Then there are divining rods. Because every cell has thousands of things. So there are 60 million and most of them are sentences. And sound, scan, and material samples are very precious and rare. So this is where these precious things ended up. And we would not really often come across them if we would just look at the first 16 sentences or something like this. So I called it myself a divining rod that makes things appear to the surface that are hidden very deep in the topography, such as scans, sounds, and samples. And so we use these normally in any place that we come about, just to see what's there. So this now, like with this, I'm going to conclude my talk very soon. So this was just a sketch of how one might non-exhaustively progress through the open expanse. So there's the hero bottle, the guide spectre, the pack animal, and all the qualitators, and all of them are on the way. They go onward, and now and then a song rises to their lips, a versicle, taken most part from audible, to that which they fulfill in the wind. We haven't touched on this last crucial dimension of the quest, that which makes quests epic. Words do not matter, writes Popper. But both for the classical reader or the monk, writes Illich, Reading engages the whole body. It turns out that words do matter when we voice them in speech or song, even if nobody listens. But who hears it? Asked Irigaray. Their song insensibly waters the world. The digital world is full of digital objects, way more than we can ever read in a lifetime, let alone read out. This forbids an exhaustive approach, not attempting to uncover everything exhaustively, but intelligently discovering the modes in which natural, technical, digital, vectorial things might make up our world. The quest allows us to newly lend a voice to things. The mechanics of the architectonic quest do not do away with it even. They even requires millions of automated queries ruminating in the background of our computers to sort corpuscles based on numbers and words. But in doing so, it frees up our eyes and our hands and our voices for a new kind of search and our mouths for new utterances. So far, I like to think of the quest coming after the completion. For example, when Odysseus finds home after 12 books, or when Aeneas founds a new home after 24 books. And when their encounters are then rhapsodically recounted. But the quest in the vectorial world is not epic post factum. It presents. It is not an epic recounting as much as an active invoking of everything and nothing, everyone and no one in particular. In doing so, the epic quest waters the world. It does not recount or represent the world, but each epic encounter engages with the world, so that it may blossom. Thank you.